Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the inaugural lecture for the Fung Memorial Professorship of Tourism Management by Professor Robert Lee. Please rise for the entrance for the official procession. Please be seated. Good afternoon. My name is Sophia, a Year 2 student from the Faculty of Business Administration. It is my honor to serve as your MC today. To begin with, please welcome Professor Dennis Lau, the Vice Chancellor and President of the Chinese University of Hong Kong, to deliver a vote of thanks to Mr. Tony Fung. Professor Lau, please.
Mr. Tony Fung, Professor Robert Lee, Professor Zhao Ling, colleagues and friends, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It gives me great honor to welcome you all to this memorable event, marking a significant milestone in the career of Professor Robert Lee, Director of the School of Hotel and Tourism Management of the Faculty of Business Administration at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. We're here today to commemorate his inauguration as the Fung Memorial Professor of Tourism Management. This momentous occasion would not have been possible without the generous support from Mr. Tony Fung, owner, controller of the Equus Group, who has kindly established this esteemed professorship in the name of his late father, the legendary property giant and venture capitalist, Mr. Fung Ging-hei. On behalf of CUHK, I'd like to extend our heartfelt thanks to Mr. Tony Fung for his generosity and commitment to the advancement of CUHK as a civic institution in pursuit of excellence in education, research, innovation, and service. CUHK takes pride in our strong connection with the Fung family. Our privilege of benefiting from the support of the Fung family can be traced back to the late 70s, during which the late Mr. Fung Ging-hei played a pivotal role in the development and success of our MBA program. For his generous donations, visionary leadership on the MBA Advisory Board in his early years, and the outstanding support for teaching, research, and establishment of key facilities. As a lasting memorial to his long-term support for the university, a teaching block on our main campus was dedicated in memory of Mr. Fung Sr. And following in the visionary step of his father, Mr. Tony Fung has carried on the philanthropic spirit and provided much help and encouragement to us over the years. He has provided enormous support in shaping the university's MBA program, as well as contributing to institutional development for his early years of service at the University Council and its Finance Committee, the Board of Trustees of New Asia College, as well as the University Appointments Board. In recognition of his outstanding contribution to the university, he was conferred an honorary fellowship by CUHK in 2007. We're grateful that Mr. Fung continues to deepen his commitment to our Faculty of Business Administration by establishing the Fung Ging-hei Memorial Professorship of Tourism Management. This marks an extension of his deep association with the university that he holds so dearly to his heart. Mr. Fung, thank you very much for your unwavering belief in the capacity of our business school in nurturing professional executives and fostering impactful research to benefit humankind. I'm sure that you're all as eager as I am to listen to the inaugural lecture of Professor Robert Lee as the Fung Ging-hei Memorial Professor of Tourism Management. Professor Lee will reflect on his evolution from a destination marketing expert to a bridge builder across disciplines and culture. He will also highlight how tourism and hospitality can help address some of the most pressing issues facing humanity. So I take this opportunity to extend my warmest congratulations to Professor Lee on receiving this prestigious honor. As we move forward, let's remain steadfast in honoring the benevolence and philanthropic vision of the Fung family. Together with Mr. Fung, we look forward to nurturing talents through education, research, and collaboration, ultimately contributing to a more sustainable and socially responsible tourism industry. And once again, thank you very much, Mr. Fung, for gracing us with your presence, which will enable CUHK to remain at the forefront of professional business education. So ladies and gentlemen, I wish you a most enjoyable time. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Low. May I now invite Professor Low, accompanied by Professor Lin Zhou, Dean of Business Administration, and Professor Robert Lee to present a certificate of appreciation to Mr. Tony Fung. Mr. Tony Fung, Professor Lin Zhou, and Professor Robert Lee, please. Thank you all. Please be seated. Now, please welcome Professor Lin Zhou, Dean of Business Administration, to introduce our Distinguished Speaker Series. Professor Zhou, please.
Dear Mr. Tony Fung, Professor Low, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. In the years following the pandemic, many of us have reflected on the true meaning of travel. Once taken for granted as more economic activity or leisure, tourism has revealed its profound value in understanding human behavior and contributing to personal well-being. But long before this, Professor Robert Lee has already developed a special connection with tourism, dedicating his academic journey to this study. Professor Lee grew up in Nanjing, a city Chinese poets once described as 六朝金粉地, a land of splendor under 6 dynasties. Along a crossroad of culture, politics, and human aspiration, Nanjing is where Professor Lee first encountered tourism, not in theory, but in practice. For 5 years, he worked in the city's tourism bureau, an experience that grounded his future scholarship. From Nanjing, his journey took him to the United States, where he pursued doctoral studies at Texas A&M University. There, Professor Lee began asking the questions that would define his career. How are destinations imagined and positioned? How do tourists make their decisions? What followed was nearly 2 decades of teaching and research in the United States at the universities of South California and later Temple University. During these years, Professor Lee's scholarly output was remarkable. More than 270 journal and conference articles and book chapters, recognized by over 30 research awards, including twice the Charles Goldner Article of Excellence Award. Yet, the real impact lay beyond volume. What distinguished Professor Lee's work is its consistent ability to connect theory with practice. His research on Chinese outbound tourism provided one of the earliest systemic, large-scale analyses of Chinese tourists, shaping the policy environment behind an agreement that redefined tourism flows between China and the United States, a profound case of academic insight translating into real-world action. In recent years, his work has evolved further, moving beyond flows and the destinations to the deeper foundation of tourism, how travel shapes values, well-being, and the ways individuals relate to place and to one another, and what this reveals about contemporary society. His leadership in the field has been equally substantial. As the associate editor of tourism management, and now as a member of the editorial boards of more than 10 journals, Professor Lee has helped shape not only what is published, but also which questions matter the most. His research has attracted more than 2.6 million US dollars in grants and contracts, and fostered wide-ranging collaborations across America and Asia. He's currently serving a 4-year term, progressing through the roles of second vice president, first vice president, president, and the chair of the board of esteemed Travel and Tourism Research Association, which boasts nearly 1,600 industry and academic members worldwide. He is the first Asian to hold this position in the 50 years fabled history of the organization. In 2025, Professor Lee brought this international experience to CUHK Business School, where he now serves as the director of the School of Hotel and Tourism Management. And today is inaugurated as the Fung Memorial Professor of Tourism Management. This professorship honors not only academic excellence, but also leadership with purpose, a testament of CUHK Business School's endearing commitment to scholarship in service of society. Before I conclude, I would also like to acknowledge with deep gratitude the generosity of our donor, Mr. Tony Fung, and his family. Their steadfast support has made the professorship possible, and their commitment reflects a belief in education, in scholarship, and in the long-term value of nurturing ideas that serve society. Professor Lee, we warmly congratulate you on your inauguration. We are delighted that your journey now continues here with CUHK, with us.
Thank you, Professor Zhou. May I invite you and Professor Lo to take your seats in the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Professor Robert Lee. Professor Lee, please.
Dear Mr. Tony Fung, Professor Lo, Ding Zhou, distinguished guests, friends, students, ladies and gentlemen, this is a little bit overwhelming. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your tremendous support and all the kind words. I'm not sure I deserve all the compliments, but I will take them. For all the colleagues, friends from different corners of China coming here, and students, thank you for your support. Your presence makes a huge difference. It means a lot to me. A special shout out to Mr. Fung and your family for your generous contribution to this endowed professorship. Holding this title is a tremendous honor and a huge obligation that I will not take for granted. An event like this usually means two things. Number one, it reminds you that you are getting old. And number two, it invites some reflections. And this is the purpose of this presentation, that I would like to share a little bit about my stories and journeys to be a so-called bridge builder and a so-called complete academic, whatever it means. To begin with, I would like to share a little bit about my personal background. I was born to Professor Li Zhi and Miss Lu Lumeng. My father is an aerodynamicist, dedicated over a decade of his early career to petroleum drilling in northern China. And later on, he relocated to Nanjing and transitioned to teaching biostatistics and researching traditional Chinese medicine. Don't ask me why. And he taught in a local university in Nanjing. There are a couple of things about my upbringing that is kind of noteworthy. First of all, my father has a diverse range of personal and professional interest. He's a mathematician by training. He graduated from Peking University's Department of Mathematics and Mechanics. But he has huge passion about arts and literature, particularly classic music and theatric performance. So it is in this environment that I was encouraged to pursue my interest, certainly not mathematics, and to cultivate a free spirit. The second thing is that my family, my parents, firmly believe in the concept of read thousands of books and travel thousands of miles. So it is at very early in my age, actually it was about age of 4 that I started my first leisure trip, when leisure travel was basically non-existent in China back then. So I can say that I caught the travel bug very early. And the third thing is that being born in a family of at least 2 generations of educators, I was determined that I won't be a professor. Life unfolded itself in unexpected ways. Look at where I am today. So, after graduation, I landed a position at the Nanjing Municipal Tourism Bureau. I was destination marketing specialist, and I was involved in a whole bunch of different projects from tourism planning, event management, and I was actually very much into different kinds of promotion and marketing of destinations. I actually spent a lot of hours in TV studios editing videos, travel videos. Several years later, when I started my PhD journey, it turned out that I was much older than many of my classmates. So for more than once, I regretted that I probably wasted 5 years of my time working in the tourism bureau. But you know what? Actually, it shaped my view of tourism and shaped my research career afterwards. And it was during my 5 years at the tourism bureau that I finished my first master's degree. And that's actually in physical geography. And after that, I took a leap and went to the US and continued my studies, got my second master's degree and PhD. So I owe tremendous debt to my 3 advisors, and in particular, Professor Jim Pichik of Texas A&M, who was my role model of my career. So here I am, after almost 20 years getting my PhD. I transitioned from several roles, starting from as a dedicated, passionate researcher and educator, and became a research center director and a so-called engaged scholar, which I will explain. And then started supervising PhD students and postdocs and visiting scholars, and became a department head in Temple University, and journal associate editor, and taking on some leadership position in different industry academic association. Until fairly recently, I started my journey at CUHK. And today I would like to actually share 3 things that I learned in this journey. The first thing is building research programs rather than simply conducting research. So in the early 1990s, in the biology department of Columbia University, there were actually two famous labs. Lab A is renowned for its rigorous training. The advisor is very strict. Everybody studied the same subjects. And all the PhD students, postdocs, are very well trained. And Lab B, which is equally prestigious, but take an entirely different approach. Every 3 months, they will change subjects. So if they find a new subject and they study it, and if it produces some high-quality research, they will continue. If not, they will just abandon it. So one day, a postdoc fellow, who later on became a very renowned biologist in China, talked to the advisor of Lab B and asked, why don't we do something similar to Lab A? And the advisor said, well, you know what? There are two ways to build your career, at least. The first approach is sort of like New York Marathon. You run New York Marathon. How do you do that? You train very hard, you build big muscle, and you have a very dedicated destination. Undivided attention, you keep running. And the second approach is sort of like a New York tour guide. You constantly look for the next attraction, followed by a group of people, big or small crowd. Whenever people are going there, well, you move to the next destination. You always find something novel. So these are two approaches that can equally produce high-quality research. And when I heard about this story, I was a little bit puzzled, because I think neither approach fits me. The first approach, the marathon approach, is fantastic, but it's a little bit boring if you just focus on one direction. And the second approach actually has a very high hidden cost if you think about it, particularly in social science. You have to familiarize yourself with the literature, methodology, and constantly switch subjects. The switching cost is pretty substantial. So later on, I decided, and after learning from the best of the best in the field, I decided to take the middle ground, which is, I guess, is a Chinese philosophy that we always take the middle ground. I started to approach this from a research program building perspective. By research program, we mean that it's actually involving multiple research elements, but linked in a coherent and sequential structure. And so you can build multiple research programs simultaneously, and you can change subjects from time to time. And later on, I read this book. This is about scientists, the most accomplished scientists in the world, and how do they achieve scientific success. It turned out that they have this so-called things called slow motion multitasking. So the most accomplished scientists, usually they have multiple subjects at the same time, allowing them to switch subjects from time to time and sustain their research interest. I found this is a pretty nice approach. So in my career up to this point, I have built about 5 research programs. And let me use one example, which Ding Zhou kindly mentioned, is about tourism destination image. My love affair with this particular concept started in the years when I was working at the Tourism Bureau. It is in that job that I came across this term called destination image, which still today fascinates me. Partly because at that time I was a destination marketing specialist, but I do not know exactly what I'm doing, what I'm selling, quote unquote, until I see, oh wow, I'm actually helping build and maintain a positive destination image, meaning that how people think of a destination. So in my first master thesis, my research questions were very straightforward. What is my city's image and how to promote it? Naturally, this is what I do as a practitioner. And in the hindsight, this is a good question. And indeed, the industry still asks this all the time today. But from an academic perspective, we need to go beyond that. So when I started my academic journey, I started to tackle this particular issue from different angles. So for example, marketing is my training background. I started studying how information search is affecting our destination image and how our destination image is affecting our information search behavior. And then later on, I was fortunate to collaborate with people from diverse backgrounds who helped me to ask some very fascinating questions, such as from a cognitive psychology perspective, from a linguistic perspective, from a biodiversity perspective. How do we actually store the information in our brain about destination image? And when we need to retrieve it, what is the most efficient path? These are all relevant questions for destination marketers, but also equally for scholars. As soon as I made some progress in this, the market environment changed substantially. When I started the line of research on destination image, we mainly study texts, meaning words and phrases people use to describe about their destination image. And then social media came. Everything is about visual now. So all the data we have, actually we have way more data in hand now, but we have tons of data from image and from videos. So all this auditory and the visual data need to be processed. And I don't know how. But I was fortunate to meet a computer science colleague in about 2017, and we're still working together today. In our first study, we started basically a visual content recommendation system for the destinations. Basically, how to match what the destinations are looking for and how the market responds the best. And then it is through this project that I realized that, well, actually we can be a little bit more ambitious, particularly in the age of social media. So in the follow-up project that we decided to build a lot of earlier research and put it into an integrative model, which I'm not going into the details, but the gist of the idea is that in the ancient time with the mass media, the supplier, the marketers actually control all the information being supplied to the market. And the tourists actually process this information passively. But today's tourists are way more active. They not only just accept what the Tourism Bureau projected them, the image, they actually took the photos and took the videos themselves. They are part of this dialogue of projecting destination image. And what our research suggests is that this matching process is actually very fundamental in determining, for example, tourist engagement level. While doing all this quantitative analysis and modeling, I can't help also thinking about something more philosophical. What exactly do we mean by tourism destination image? Is there such a thing actually existing? And I was, again, fortunate to work with people with philosophy of science background. And we went through some kind of, we borrowed a definition theory from philosophy of science and tried to propose a more rigorous definition of tourism destination image. And right now, we're working on something about the essence of destination image, which turned out to be a much harder project to publish. So in this research program, what I learned is, number one, to maintain a research program like this over 2 decades, it does take grit, take intellectual curiosity, and the ability to connect the dots. And I thoroughly enjoyed the process of building all these bridges across disciplines. And I learned tremendously from all the colleagues I partnered with. And third, destination image for all our tourism colleagues and students, you will know that it's the most well-established and published top subject in the literature. But I do think that novelty can arise when you have a combination, when you try to bridge and clash different methodological and conceptual perspectives. Now let's switch gear here. The second lesson I learned is tourism hospitality go beyond just fun. In 2011, the US Travel Association invited a group of North American tourism scholars to Washington, D.C., and we have a meeting. In this meeting, which is the industry leader in the US, they asked the question, a very simple question: what are the benefits of tourism? We said, wow, this is straightforward. We have been studying this for over 4 decades. It contributes to the society economically. It contributes to the community. It contributes to social fabric, blah, blah, blah. And they said, no, that's not what we're looking for. We want to know whether taking a vacation can lower your blood pressure or blood sugar or help you address depression, something that the industry can put on the headline story in Wall Street Journal. A group of tourism scholars actually were stuck because we have seen some anecdotal evidence, but we haven't really done too much systematically in our literature. This has inspired a new line of research in the tourism literature. A lot of researchers were engaging in the so-called benefits of tourism. I was also very interested, but to set my research apart, I decided to go the opposite way. Rather than studying the benefits of tourism, I want to study the negative association of tourism, whether tourism can actually trigger or associate it with something negative. So this is one example. Between 1978 to 2000, the American, on average, took about over 20 days of paid leave. In 2016, this number declined to 16.8. In other words, the Americans were offered a lot of time off, but they chose voluntarily to not take this time off. This, of course, is going to do harm to our industry because when you don't take vacation, it means that economic loss. But beyond that, even for the people who are actually working very hard, not taking time off, working in their organizations, it turned out that their work performance didn't improve. It actually hurts their family relationship, their own well-being. So my team, we want to study why they don't take vacation. Why don't they take time off? And we studied, and using a combination of psychology theory and some public health concepts, we concluded there is such a thing called vacation guilt, meaning that in North America, that at least people are reluctant to take time off because they were worrying about that it will put a misperception to their boss and colleagues, thinking that they're not working hard enough or taking their career seriously enough. By the way, I did this presentation in Australia once, and the Australian colleagues say we don't have this problem. And after that, we also did study on social media envy. Basically, for those of you who want to post your vacation pictures online, I'm sure you're very happy about it, but have you thought about your audience feelings? Do they really like it, or do they feel a little bit jealousy? So we studied this social media envy. And during pandemic, we studied something called travel shaming. This is an idea. During pandemic, if you still recall that, people blame the tourists who travel because they think that they're spreading virus. So they shame people who travel, and we study this. And more recently, we study something even a little bit more prevalent and fundamental. For example, we're recently working on the relationship between travel and loneliness, particularly loneliness among seniors. Whether taking a vacation can help the seniors, the retirees, to actually improve their subjective well-being. We got the opportunities to collaborate with a mainly Chinese group, study whether travel can be a lifestyle medicine that can help patients with major depression issues. And a couple of days ago, my team just finished the field work in arguably the first tourism activities organized specifically for people with dementia. We partner with the Jockey Club of Positive Aging here, that they designed a cruise trip for people with dementia. And so the dementia patients and their caregivers went on a cruise, a short cruise. And my colleagues went on the cruise and did some fascinating field work. It is through this process that I learned tremendously about the value of travel. And I learned that tourism is more than just fun. It actually can be part of the solution for some of the most fundamental and pressing issues humanity is facing. And also, I very much enjoy the process of conducting phenomenon-driven research that bridges theory and practice. That goes to the third thing that I learned, is to embrace the synergy of building a complete academic career. To explain that, first of all, I need to clarify that the word complete is not a typo. It is indeed a word. This is actually a classic career guide in psychology. This is one of the first career management books that I read as an assistant professor. And over the years, I've had a little bit hard time defining what they mean by complete academic, until I came across this idea of 斜杠, the slash life. It means basically there are people who pursue different trajectories, career trajectories. And I find this fascinating because I found that in the context of academic, we actually have, because of the nature of our work and the autonomy we enjoy, we actually have the ability and the opportunity to do something about complete academic, meaning that we intentionally pursue different career trajectories within the domain of academia without abandoning our initial passion. So think about the leaders sitting here. They started as outstanding scholars, Professor Lo, Ding Zhou, and they assumed leadership positions. And some of them, like Professor Gang Li, decided to take editorship. So they are pursuing different trajectories within academic. And I find this fascinating. And this is a little bit different from the kind of the grad school, what the grad school taught us, focusing on research with undivided attention. And I want to clarify that I don't necessarily think the complete academic approach is the way or the best approach, but it's just personally, with my personality and the way that I was brought up, I would like to pursue different things and collect some experiences. So just to be specific, when we talk about complete academic, if we put that into the dimensions of research, teaching, and service, actually it involves a variety of things. For example, if you conduct research, you can do what I just described as multiple program building. You can change subjects. You can also switch different kind of research. You can do conceptual research, you can do methodological research, you can do empirical research. You can also choose to pursue the idea of engaged scholarship. So one of my ideas of the engaged scholarship actually was, I took this kind of accidentally. My first job offer many years ago was actually from the another university, but I took the University of South Carolina's job offer because in addition to the typical tenure track position, they also offered me an associate director position, which means that in addition to all the tenure requirements, I was also encouraged and kind of expected to build industry relationship, partnership, and also bring industry dollars. And this has been a kind of a long time passion of me. And later on, when I read and I learned the idea of engaged scholarship, which means that you need to work closely with the industry, I found that I have been actually practicing this without knowing the proper terms, so to speak. And then you can also do, when you talk about teaching, you can also try to pursue different kinds of teaching, from traditional classroom teaching to exact training, mentoring students, postdocs, or even find some new ways of knowledge dissemination. So for example, on the left, for some of you who are old enough, you probably recall that I started a social media platform on WeChat called 绿柚知识. We've been running this for 5 years. So the whole idea was actually we quote-unquote translate the top-tier journals' latest articles, translate that into a light-hearted story, very short, on social media, and introduce that to the Chinese-speaking community. It was very popular, and we had about 15,000 followers during that time in the entire, I would say that the entire Chinese tourism community, lots of the researchers were following that. And this is a new way back then that you can find a new way to spread disseminate the knowledge. And then in terms of service, you can also do different kinds of service. You can serve your own institution, you can serve the profession, you can serve the larger community. So when you are taking different roles, in my case, I took a bunch of the roles, which gave me the privilege of understanding and kind of interacting with different aspects of the tourism industry and academia. It actually gave me a broader perspective. So from this whole idea of practicing the complete academic approach and trying different kind of trajectories, I found that it is important to embrace courage. And in some cases, you need to step out of your comfort zone. I never thought that I'm going to be the vice president of TTRA. And I never thought that I'm going to be a school director of CUHK. In some cases, you have to take some kind of unconventional approach. And in this process, you are testing your own ability. But in the meantime, you need to bring humility to the job. So take the work very seriously, but don't take yourself too seriously. In this process, I also learned to appreciate the synergy between all different roles, even though they have tremendous distinction, but they also share some commonality. For example, understanding human nature, respecting others, try to empathize others. So all these things help, kind of come along. And then finally, when we are working with different stakeholders, in particular for the tourism community, how to bridge the gap between industry and academia, I find it's very important for us to really appreciate what the real world is happening and what the industry are really taking priority. Over the years, I've seen a lot of academics want to work with the industry for the data, for the grants dollars, but do they actually care about what the industry needs? I find it's important to really appreciate that. I also found that we need to learn to be bilingual. By that, well, let's face it, as academics, we actually speak and write in a different language most people don't understand. When we communicate with other stakeholders, media, industry, government, we have to learn to be bilingual and speak plain English, so to speak. And the third, there's no need to be apologized for us being academic, being a little bit nerdy. And I found that the whole barriers between us and other stakeholders in many cases can be addressed by exchanging and discussing data. I found the tremendous value of doing this. And then here comes my CUHK chapter. If we talk about all the bridges that I'm trying to build, I think the most important bridge is try to bridge East and West. After spending 23 years in the US, I decided to move back to Asia and started my new journey here at CUHK. And thanks to all my wonderful colleagues, this journey, this one-year journey up to this point has been tremendously rewarding. One of the first things that I learned, and I'm puzzled, is why do we have a SHTM in a top-tier business school? And thanks to my funding director, I think I sort of get the idea. If there are disciplines, there are two types of disciplines. One is called academic or the divergent discipline, which basically you have some kind of a same concept but applied to different contexts. And there's another type of discipline, like professional discipline, like business, that we have applied to different kind of concepts to the same phenomenon and try to come up with the solution. Then we, comparing to most other disciplines, are at the front line of being convergent and professional. And if we do our education product and research well, we actually have an opportunity to strike a really good balance between rigor and relevance. Meaning that potentially, because we are so close to the industry, we can be more relevant than most of traditional disciplines, but we can also be more rigorous than the stereotypical traditional hospitality operation disciplines. What does that mean to us in terms of actually education practice? My idea is that we need to have this so-called Gen business subjects, meaning that unlike most of the business disciplines, we are actually a context that apply different business discipline principles and concepts into one particular context. In our case, is tourism hospitality. And this is who we are. We are a business degree specializing in tourism hospitality, not the other way around. And once we are very clear about our positioning, I think it actually at least means three things. Number one, we need to be innovative in coming up, developing, proposing Gen business education programs related to tourism hospitality. Number two, we need to go beyond operation and try to counter the stereotype of tourism hospitality research being the so-called intellectual lightweight. To do that, we need to choose the most fundamental and pressing research topics. We have to take our own research seriously. And third, it also means that if we do all this right, we can potentially contribute to our business school and our university by becoming a differentiator, because we can contribute by the enhanced real-world relevance and impactful research. It is based on this understanding that 2 months after I started my job, my colleagues, our team, together we proposed this new master program called Leadership for Experience Economy. It was officially approved on October the 8th. 2 months later, I'm proud to announce that we have received more than 1,000 applications. It seems to suggest to me that we are on something in the right direction. But be mindful that for an institution like CUHK, when we propose a new education product, we don't just propose a new product, we need to provide the complete academic logic behind it. We need to provide the theory, the conceptualizing behind it. I think the idea of leadership for experience economy is partly based on the idea of experience economy, which basically means that in today's environment, business care more about building memorable experiences over the traditional delivery of product and services. But there's also another aspect, which I call hospitality thinking. It basically is a universal attitude towards our industry and things beyond. It's based on the very idea of human territoriality. So if you go back to the roots of hospitality, it means something very simple: how we treat strangers, how we take care of them. The idea of hospitality thinking basically means how open and receptive we are to the strangers and deliver something that they care about. So it is based on this idea we propose a conceptualization. I'm not going into the details, but we are still working on this. but hopefully it will provide some of the justification and the rationale of why we're doing what we're doing. I will be remiss to wrap up this presentation without acknowledging and appreciating a lot of people who support and shape my career. And this is additional insights that I learned, is people first. A fundamental philosophy I hold is always to work with people who are smarter than me, and it's not very difficult to find them. Over the years, I have the privilege to work with lots of colleagues in different disciplines, and I learned tremendously from all of them. And in particular, I have this privilege to work with 30-ish PhD students, postdoc, and visiting scholars, and some of them are here. Thank you so much for letting me to be part of your career and life. This is about it. I would like to conclude by also thanking my own family, my wife, Nora Jo, and my twins, Hanru and Anru. I'm sure that you will watch the video afterwards. And I'm particularly tremendously indebted for my late parents. And I'm sure they are watching this from heaven. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Lee, for your inspiring lecture. Please be seated. May I now invite the Vice Chancellor and the Dean of Business Administration to return to the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the inaugural lecture. Please rise for the exit of the official procession.